Okay, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm going to throw over to Gianabba now for a quick intro, and we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Canada Life Capacity Building Program webinar. My name is Diana Bafol. I'm the Client Service Coordinator at the Standards Program. So our presentation today will be in English with slides available in both languages. Participants will have the opportunity to ask questions in French. Regarding our work here at Imagine Canada, our staff operations, work, and network depend on traditional Indigenous territories to provide us physical space, sustenance, safety, and community to work, live, and play. I'm aware that we are not all located in the same place. I'm based in Vancouver, while our physical office is based in Toronto. We would like to acknowledge that the land in which our office is situated has been part of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat. We acknowledge that these lands are covered by Treaty 13 and the Dish with One Spoon, One Palm Bell Covenant. We acknowledge, of course, that these lands are still home to many diverse First Nations, Métis and Inuit people, and we are grateful to be able to live and work on this land. I also invite you to join me in taking a moment of reflection to think about the Indigenous communities of the territories where you live and the actions we can all take daily to build connections with these communities and respect the territories we live. Et en français, je vous invite donc à vous joindre à moi pour prendre un moment de réflexion afin de penser aux communautés autochtones des territoires où vous habitez, aux actions que nous pouvons tous entreprendre au quotidien pour établir des liens avec ces communautés et dans le respect des territoires que nous occupons. Now I will pass it off to Tim Richardson, Senior Manager of the Standards Program. He will be leading today's presentation.
Thanks so much, Gianabba. So the agenda for today is that we're going to give a brief program overview, so how the Canada Life Capacity Building Program works. Then we're going to speak more broadly about accreditation, the standards, and why why the program exists, why the standards program exists, and why we undertake accreditation, and the benefits. And then we'll follow that up by the Q&A, as Gianabba said, will be available in both French and English. So let's go to the next slide. I'm going to speak a little bit about Imagine Canada. So for those of you who are not familiar with Imagine Canada, or maybe those of you who have a kind of a rusty awareness of Imagine Canada, we're a national charity that supports charities and nonprofits through our advocacy efforts, sector research, capacity building resources, and other services so that organizations in Canada can serve communities here and around the world. So what with the standards and accreditation process, this is one of the services we offer among many others. So you'll see that we're going to take a deeper dive on the one on the top left. You may have heard of Grant Connect. It's our fundraising CRM, a tool for researching funding prospects. We have Prism, which is a community impact company network, a series of companies, formerly the Caring Companies program, where a percentage of their profits go to charities and nonprofits. And that program has expanded and been reimagined in recent months. So stay in touch about that program. There's some interesting things happening there. HR Intervals is a free resource hub for HR resources. That's available at hrintervals.ca. Our membership program, many of the organizations in here are members of Imagine Canada. That's our sort of collective efforts to advocate for changes to the way that nonprofits and charities are treated in Canada, and comes with many other aspects to it as well. We recently kind of launched the Canadian Centre for Nonprofit Digital Resilience, which was previously an external organization to Imagine Canada, but has come within the Imagine Canada sort of organization. So there's a separate website for that. And then what we sort of were initially known for, and now I'm continue to do this day, is our public policy and advocacy and research and foresight work. So what are the sector trends? What are the enabling the nonprofit sector to speak with a collective voice in the realm of public policy. So this is the standards team. This is the team that's most focused on standards work at Imagine Canada. We, of course, make use of folks from all across Imagine Canada, but these are the folks who primarily focused on standards. So we've got Gianabba, who you met, Tamara, is our senior coordinator, and together with Danielle and Kat, who are also coordinators with the standards and bilingual, they work through, they help organizations get to that accreditation stage through supporting them in the screening process, answering questions and helping deal with kind of nuanced aspects of the standards. There's me, the senior manager of standards. Holly is our new senior associate program insights and learning person. So she helps us advance um, some of the thinking around standards development, both within the standards program and PRISM. Some really interesting conversations there that I'll get a bit more into later for those around at the end. Devin is the VP who oversees the program. And then Christina is our manager of partnerships and communications. She'll be answering questions at the end of this process for those asking in French. And she's focused on building partnerships and developing our network across Canada. Okay. So, Canada Life is our founding and presenting partner. So, since the very beginning of the standards accreditation program, since its very inception around 14, 15 years ago, and launch around 13 years ago, Canada Life has been a really positive and foundational supporter to that work and has carried us through as we continue to develop and grow the program. In our most recent relationship, the most recent sort of phase of our relationship here, we are now um, uh, partnering on this specific program. So Canada Life is a leading insurance, wealth management, and benefits provider focused on improving the financial, physical, and mental well-being of Canadians. So thank you so much to Canada Life. The Canada Life Capacity Building Program. The intention is to build strong governance, financial transparency, and fostering trust in Canada's nonprofit and charitable sector. And we'll do that through each accreditation that we undertake and hopefully with some of the folks in this meeting right now. So in terms of program goals, we intend to build the capacity of nonprofit and charitable sector organizations that are committed to continuous improvement and excellence, and also to sort of an aggregate by accrediting organizations and building organizational excellence across the sector, fostering a sector that is well governed, managed transparently, and prepared to face risks and navigate organizational challenges. So lots to do there. It's also around kind of gaining trust in the sector, ensuring the general public, governments, funders trust and have reasons to trust the nonprofit sector to deliver services, deliver programs, and other pieces. So we'll get a bit more into those broad why questions later. But in terms of this program, it's open to all registered charities and public benefit nonprofit organizations in Canada, with particularly encouraging applications from organizations led by or supporting Black and racialized communities. So get in touch if you have any questions about that. In terms of benefits, so what comes with this support? So this isn't a typical granting process. The benefits are the standards community membership, the accreditation process, and the coverage of all fees associated with what normally would be the cost for those processes. So we have free access to the standards community. This is actually a really powerful resource hub, guidance hub template with accessible templates, resources, and other tools. This is going through a major overhaul and is relaunching really in a matter of weeks now. We're expecting a late March launch. For those of you who have seen the sector source that is currently available, where you can access the equivalent, these resources are all being overhauled. So there'll be news about that soon. So anyone involved in this program will get 12 months of access to this new platform. All fees associated are covered by Canada Life. We'll get through to what those usually are later. You also receive personalized support from the Imagine Canada team throughout the process, which is really useful when you're trying to figure out a new policy or a new process and trying to figure out how it should apply. You get that one-to-one staff support. And then there's also the opportunity to receive advice from peer organizations to address challenges, refine strategies, and implement best practices. Finally, there's the gap analysis tool, which is, we'll provide a link to that later on. Um, and that provides that allows you to sort of see every single standard, every single evidence requirement, and um, begin to build towards that objective. So I see a question. I will come to that. That question will be answered by a future slide. So I'll just I can check back in when we cover that. So in terms of the application process, so there's two stages. Um, and to the question around recording, yes, I should have said at the start, it's recorded and we will be sending around the recording. So feel free to watch that later. So there's two stages of the application. Stage one is the expression of interest, which I know that many organizations have already submitted. So thank you for those. Those are due on March 28th as a deadline. Um, and stage two um, is we'll follow stage one, and we'll take the initial slate of expressions of interest. We'll assess eligibility, and if that and the number of organizations that that we are able to support through the process exceeds the number of applications, we'll form a selection committee um, to evaluate the slate of applications. To evaluate the fit with the objectives and the readiness for accreditation. And then we'll have to make some choices and get back to organizations about who was successful in the process. We expect to deliver that decision around April or May with a public announcement around June this year. And then you'll see from here on out, there is this process that really does vary in terms of its length, depending on your readiness. But this is once you're accepted into the capacity building program, there is the accreditation application, the screening completed by staff, and then the peer review process, followed by a final decision-making panel, and then kind of announcement and the ongoing support of the organization that continues after that. So it says down there 9 to 18 months. Really, the biggest variable is your readiness. So, when you take a look at the gap analysis tool, you might very quickly see, oh, we're basically 90% there. We just need to do this and this, and introduce this policy or this process. Or it could be that there's a lot of work, or there might be 90% complete, but there's a significant piece of work around a strategic plan that hasn't been renewed recently, or a major policy that the board's really going to need to discuss, or that staff are really going to need to discuss. So it's quite variable, but once you're in that sort of peer review, once you've submitted for peer review, it's more dependable around a 4 to 6 month process following that. So in terms of this expression of interest, some of you may have already seen the link. I know many have already filled this in, but there's a short expression of interest form. You provide basic organizational info and then a short expression of interest. It's intended to be a very low barrier to entry. We don't want to, have a whole onerous process for this. We want to make sure that organizations can express their interest and then know where they stand with eligibility before hearing back about the stage two. So as I said, if stage two occurs, then a mixed committee will evaluate applicants using rationale, approach, strategy, and diversity. So in short, what does the organization have a strategic plan in mind? Do they have a rationale for why they're doing this work at this time? What their approach would be, and the diversity is alluded to in the eligibility criteria. So whom is being served and whom is leading the organization. All organizations will, of course, be informed of the outcome, and successful organizations sign an agreement and attend orientation. So any questions about that, feel free. I'll take a pause after the next couple of slides to address some of those questions in there. So dates to consider, lots of text on this slide. Don't worry too much about remembering any of this. I think the things to flag are the screening dates for each of these panels. So you'll see that we have a June 12th screening date for our November panels. We have an October 23rd screening date, and then a March screening date in 2026. So these are our cycles. We each year we have three sets of panels that are available to newly accrediting organizations, and you can go through that process from screening to peer review to the panel to the decision and announcement. And any one of those panels or a future panel, depending on your timescales, depending on the capacity that you have at various times to undertake this work. Um, so just bear those in mind. And then to that question earlier about all fees, this is all fees associated with the application. So as was asked in the question, there's sort of three kinds of fees that organizations pay. There's the community fee, which is a monthly fee while you're applying, and then a one-time application fee when you submit for peer review. And then upon accreditation, there's a license fee, which is paid annually upon accreditation and then every year following that anniversary date. So what the Canada Life Capacity Building Program is, in addition to everything else I mentioned, it covers the fees for the organization to get them to the point of accreditation. So just lowering that barrier to entry there. And you'll see that it's on quite a sliding scale. So the size of organization refers to the revenues of the organization. So based on a 3-year average of organizational revenues. And you'll see it's quite a sliding scale depending on that. Yeah, let's go to the next page and perhaps I'll take a look at these questions. So yeah, as I mentioned, the gap analysis tool is a really good tool to figure out, where you stand, where your organization stands, where the gaps might be, how big those gaps are. Taking a look at those timelines, figuring out when this work could take place, how much work it is, and who might do it. Talk to your board. This isn't required at all for the expression of interest phase, but once you do get to that, decision stage 2 piece, to move ahead with something like accreditation, you need board approval for that. So we're going to need to see that any organization that is, accepted by the program and granted will need to show, board approval. And yeah, the rationale, as I mentioned, is going to be important, sort of why now, and make sure your submissions are complete and applying by March 28th, 2025. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so before I go over this poll, I'm just going to check the questions we've had here. Okay, to Tamara or Tamara. Only available, simply interested in capacity building support around key organizations. Yes, this program, so you do receive standards community membership as a part of this process, which does involve the capacity building process. But this program is intended for those intending or see it as feasible that they go through the accreditation program in the coming year or next year period. So yeah, while you are able to access all those tools and supports, it's intended for those folks who are going through that process. And to the question around funding bodies, mandatory. The program is not mandatory. Yeah, there are no funders that we are aware of that make accreditation a mandatory requirement for accreditation for funding. The what it is seen as an advantage. For many funders, it is a huge benefit because some of that due diligence that funders need to do with each fundee, especially ones they maybe haven't worked with before, is really taken care of by the sort of exhaustive accreditation process. So for many funders, that's seen as an advantage, is that they're accredited and they've gone through this sort of deep process of accountability and transparency. I can expand, Gabriella, briefly on each of the criteria. And this is sort of unpacked a little bit for those that reach the stage 2 process. So rationale is simply an explanation of, how you hope to benefit from the process, from the capacity building, and from the accreditation. It's really, like a paragraph or two to sort of convey a sense of that. The approach would be something like a plan for how this work is undertaken, who would be responsible, whether you have like a group or committee in mind to kind of see it through, and those kinds of things. Strategy is the organization strategy because, as I mentioned, the strategic plan is sort of an important one of the standards, and we need to sense that the organization, it has a clear sense of strategy um, and has given thought to the future of the organization and the cause that they're pursuing. And then diversity is around the diversity of the senior staff members of the board and the community served. So just some descriptive questions around that. Um, we understand you make suitable exceptions for very small organizations which do not have full-time permanent employees. Yes, there is. So that's a special consideration process, which I think I'll leave the rest of the questions to the end just to make sure there's time. And we will touch a little bit on special considerations. So I will go deeper on that. So in terms of the poll, are we able to make that poll pop up? Thank you. So I'm just curious about the group here. What is one quality of a nonprofit or charity that helped you build trust with them? If maybe you went to a fundraiser or received an email or used to work or volunteer at an organization, what is that quality that made you feel as though um, you could really trust them with your time, with your money, um, with your attention? Curious about people's answers here. We'll give perhaps a minute for responses here. And just while people are doing that, I might as well answer Kelsey's question. Um, there is an intention to run this program on a more regular basis, but annually, can't quite commit at this moment to, next February we'll be doing this exact thing. We're going to develop the program as we go. But yes, there is an intention for Canada Life capacity building program to repeat. I wouldn't let that discourage you from applying though. It's if the timelines are unclear this year, you can still apply and let us know if later there's a decision from the board or something that the work needs to be deferred. So I encourage you to still apply. All right. We're still getting responses here, but we're ending the poll. Let's see some of these answers. Okay. Christina, do you wanna read out a few of these answers that we've received?
I'm sorry, but I don't see them.
Okay, no worries. I thought people might want a non-me voice for a little bit, but I'll I'll keep going. Transparency in work and communications, efforts to communicate impact to their work and what your support achieves. Transparency with donations, thanking volunteers and donors. Their cause, trust in what they are doing, transparency, open communications. Delivery results on their objectives. They are transparent with how they spend the money. A lot of transparency. If there were a word cloud, transparent would be right in the center, I think, here based on these. Someone simply said data, which I'm curious about. Competency to do what they say they'll do, aimed at improving quality of life, communicative of donation and funding impact. Someone mentioning that an accredited organization, Knowledge Network, their accreditation with us built their trust, which is how they found out about this program. Being clear in communication, impacting communities, audited financial statements, meeting with employees of the program, transparency, personal connection, positive attitude, showing the results with an impact with clarity and transparency, personal letter or email, phone calls. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Really interesting. Actually, I can click a button here to share the results, but thank you for sharing. That's really interesting. And the word transparency coming up quite as much, I had not expected. But it's really interesting seeing the kind of standards reflected in these, seeing in each of these responses, I see, almost very specific standards like being clear to the public about the progress of your work, about your strategic plan, about what's happening, about where are your finances, who signed off on them, can I find them on the website or are they buried somewhere, or do I have to go ask someone about that? Like this is all very validating. So that's great to hear that people have experienced this sort of trust with these organizations. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to go into the Imagine Canada Standards, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. But I want to go through a little bit about the history of this program. So we're celebrating 12 years of building excellence and trust in the charitable and nonprofit sector. Um, as I said, this program was kind of created around 14 years ago as a synthesis of a number of codes and best practices and sets of standards that different bodies within Canada's nonprofit sector had, and it was intended that it was not just to combine these sets, but also to provide kind of a process by which these become embodied in organizations. You know, you can sign a code of ethics, but that isn't the same thing as, you know, demonstrating that you are following the code of ethics and continuously improving towards that end. So yeah, we've seen, you know, a great history to this program. And a strong level of you know, accreditation and you know, retention of those folks who are accredited. Let's go to the next slide here. Oh, the Imagine Canada standards are, you know, rigorous, independent review of the following key areas. So there's board governance, financial accountability and transparency, fundraising, staff management, and volunteer engagement. I'm just going to say it up front that, of course, some aspects of this may flag something in you. Let's say that you don't really use volunteers. You have a board, but you don't use volunteers in the traditional sense, or perhaps you're an entirely volunteer-run organization. You know, you think, well, that's not much use to me. I don't really have staff to manage. Um, I think one thing to say at the very outset is that the standards are never intended to force you to arbitrarily jump through a hoop or tick a checkbox just to show you comply with this set of standards. The intention is always that they are meaningful and meaningfully implemented. So when it comes to you know, a standard that isn't a great fit for your organization due to some factor, like an obvious factor, like we don't have staff, so we don't need to have an HR manual. We're not going to say, well, just in case you have staff, that create a full HR manual. You know, there's exemptions, there's what we call special considerations to those standards. And often there are nuanced ways in which you may need a special consideration. You know, we recognize that the Imagine Canada standards are for all charities and nonprofits across Canada, and that involves, you know, however many hundreds of subsectors and mission areas and demographics and all these pieces that creates huge amounts of diversity and variability in how we implement the standards. So if you read a standard and think, oh, well, that doesn't make sense for us, it's really worth getting in touch with us because there's the kind of rationale, the spirit of the standard is more important than the letter of the standard. If you're following the spirit but not the letter of the standard, then that's a discussion that we can definitely have. Okay. So there are 73 standards. They're developed by the sector for the sector and initially developed and also refined and changed over time through in-depth consultations. There are 3 accreditation levels. So I mentioned the fee categories earlier, but levels are determined by the expenses of the organization and the full-time equivalent employees. So it's a proxy for the size of the organization, for the number of people, the amount of expenses that it has. So those the levels are not a hierarchy. It's not level 3 is the best kind of accreditation. It's just representative of the size and so the number of standards and what is included in each standard. I mentioned special considerations. Yeah, we can happy to discuss any of that. And then the accreditation period is 5 years long. And upon upon that 5 years, there's a reaccreditation process. So you go through essentially the process again, but with the new standards included and any excluded standards excluded, of course. And there's also a compliance process in between there, but I won't get too in the weeds on that. Okay, so why get accredited? We've touched on this a few times, but you know, as an organization, as a sector, being accredited and coming in line with the standards builds trust in the sector, in your organization, that leads to, you know, a higher engagement, you know, higher satisfaction rates from sort of key stakeholders. a true reassurance to someone who's giving money or time, funders and individual donors, that their money is well spent, that the organization is well run, and that their investment won't be wasted or misused. There's a real reassurance piece there. Allowing you to focus on what matters. Sometimes the advantage is there's a million webinars and workshops and get an email every day about some aspect of something I should be working on as an organization. And there's obviously a lot that can be done to improve an organization, but kind of one of the nice pieces of the standards and accreditation is that you have this kind of sector consulted, agreed upon best practices that can improve how that gives some guidance to a board or senior staff who are looking for, which things to do next via that gap analysis process. Strengthening governance, of course, and that's associated with managing risk. So, ensuring legal compliance, often that anxiety that board members have that, is there some aspect of my fiduciary responsibilities I'm missing? Being accredited and maintaining accreditation really kind of can help allay that worry and that concern that some board and staff members have. You know that you're doing a lot of you have a lot of those pieces under control. And strengthening governance, we're talking about one way of seeing this, and based on some feedback we've gotten in the past that I found very interesting, is that part of the advantages of strengthening governance is, having great governance is great unto itself, but it can be very powerful when the board is a fully engaged board, is able to kind of get out of the weeds of its day-to-day, processes of approvals and basic levels of discussions, and go to a more generative place and think about, well, okay, so what is the big picture here? What are we actually trying to achieve? And are we doing that? And what are the opportunities? And who are the partners we could attract? And who are the funders that we have in our networks? Freeing up those board to have those higher level generative discussions can be really powerful. There's the demonstrating leadership piece. So, it differentiates an organization that has been accredited and gone through that process, and also helps to, signal to other organizations in the sector that there's value in this work. As a former executive director of a charity, a small charity in Toronto, we didn't actually get accredited, but I did use the standards as a way to improve my organization and implement a number of policies as a result. And as an accredited organization, it's showing that leadership and creating that space for awareness in the sector, because we find that the kind of the accredited organizations are somewhat the tip of the iceberg of the change that the standards make. So we know that lots of organizations, improve as a result, even if they're not fully accredited this time. So there's that piece. And then the opportunity to continuously improve and, of course, get recognition, being able to share your accomplishment with your community, with major donors, with all your donors, with funders. And there's it's a big undertaking, and the result is a really meaningful achievement at the end of that. And you'll see that we have over 280 accredited organizations across the country under quite a variety of cause areas. There's a QR code link there for our full list of accredited organizations at this time. But as I mentioned, it's a very diverse network on account of being open to all charities and nonprofits. And a little bit of the background is the sort of declining trust in institutions in the corporate sector, in the government sector, and the nonprofit sector has seen declining trust, especially in the lead up to the launch of this program. So in a way, a response to that, this sense that the kind of organizations and groups out there are, somehow in it for themselves. And for a long time, the charitable sector was kind of exempt from that interpretation. But, there has been like a growing skepticism or a belief that, that there are bad actors or overpaid CEOs or these pieces that that have come into people's minds via sort of various news stories that we can all, remember. And so kind of a countervailing force to that is the work towards accreditation. And indeed, in surveys and polls that we've carried out with public opinion polling firms, we found that accreditation is a extremely positive indicator to the public of of an organization being trustworthy. Is that sort of third-party accreditation. Finally, a quick note on confidentiality. So only Imagine Canada staff working on the application, peer reviewers, and Standards Council members can see application details and submitted materials. And all those folks sign conflict of interest and confidentiality agreements. So you are sharing, some private details in some of the responses to the standards, and you can rest assured that those are bound by strict confidentiality. Just a quick shout out to the gap analysis tool. Currently, it's in a Google Sheet format that you can download to Excel, whatever software you use, and just get that quick sense of where you're at. I won't linger too much on this slide. We have the Reimagine Standards community launching imminently in the coming month or two. The standards development process has changed. Some of the folks in this meeting may have been involved in the survey that we sent out around how to change that process, but we're getting ready to implement that change. Many other changes coming up soon. I see a question in the chat. I'm just making sure I covered everything here. I did just want to mention quickly, we are reviewing the accessibility of the standards and evaluating the standards through an Indigenous lens, and as well as developing a pilot module for grant-making organizations in partnership. So some interesting work going on there. So I'm sorry, I think I cut someone off who was speaking.
Yes, Tim, it was me, no problem. I was just moving to the questions section, but I saw a question pop up here, but whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. Well, let's do it. Christina, do you want to pitch the questions at me, and people will hear a voice other than mine, at least for the questions?
Sure. I see a question from Kelsey Morrison Fisher. She's asking if the organization is a local chapter of a national organization and they operate autonomously, have their own CRA number. Can you confirm if the organization should seek accreditation on their own, or is it possible to join with other local regional chapters to apply under one umbrella?
So accreditation is you accredit an organization as in a legal entity. So if you have a different business number or CRA number, then you get accreditation separately. We do have a lot of relationships with like federated organizations, and there can be some benefits to doing it in coordinating with that federated agency or other chapters when you go through that process. So definitely get in touch, Kelsey. That is, that's definitely something that's been done a bunch of times. But ultimately, it is a question of this specific organization, because every organization has different policies, has a different board. And so we only accredit sort of like one organization at a time.
We have a question from Tamara. Is this program only available to agencies intending to go through the accreditation program?
Oh, Christine, I think I answered that one a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
I think the last one I didn't answer starts off at, is the program to cover the fees only for when organizations, I think.
Yeah, we have a question if the opportunity will be available on an annual basis.
I answered that one too. Sorry. It was the next one I didn't answer, but that was sort of like the question I answered before, which is that it's only the process of getting accredited. Yes, it's the standards community fees and the application fee, but not the license fees following that. And I think Samantha Bondi is the next question, Christina.
So if many of policies, etc., they're underway by an organization, they are working on that.
Do you still encourage?
Yeah, well into the gap analysis, bind by the board project plan implemented with tasks assigned to relevant. Oh boy.
Yeah, this is yeah, definitely. Yeah, we encourage you to apply. People at different levels of readiness. I mean, there are organizations I know of that have done a lot of this work behind the scenes and aren't even on our radar, and then they'll pop out of nowhere and say, "Okay, we're ready. Here's our submission." And yeah, that's totally appropriate. Feel free to apply to this program.
We have a question from Indu. Do you have standards for programs and services, program approach specific? The organization provides services to community, specifically people living with dementia.
We do know. So the five areas of the standards that I mentioned are the five sort of sections. We don't have currently, like, as I mentioned, we're developing grant making standards and we are exploring developing modules for other kind of federations or subsectors. But right now, it's those five sections that are kind of universal to nonprofit governance, financial transparency, HR, and so on. So we don't have those specific standards there.
Yeah, I think it answers also to Arlinda's question. So Cindy asks, for a level 3 organization, what is the average commitment in terms of time spent to become accredited?
I would say that the size of the organization doesn't have as much of an impact on the time it takes as you'd think, because I often frame this as the capacity challenge versus the coordination challenge. So often smaller organizations face a kind of a capacity challenge. That part of this program is an attempt to overcome that challenge through providing the application and application fees and other benefits. But there are still capacity challenges. You still have to get someone to do the work. But also on the flip side, at a smaller organization, you perhaps don't have as many bodies or committees or individuals that things need to go run by before they're approved. On a level 3 organization side, there can be, on a much larger organization, there can be a lot more buy-in required, a lot more negotiation or debate or things like that. So I don't know if the size of the organization is really determinative of the time it takes. It's so variable. It could take 3 months to apply. It could take, a year and a half, depending on the organization. So that's my sort of non-committal answer. I hope that helps a little bit.
Tim, could you explain and speak more about the compliance process and the reaccreditation process in terms of timelines and the process itself?
Yes, I can. So the accreditation process, as you know, I've sort of explained it. The compliance, so in between accreditation and reaccreditation, every other year. So let's say you got accredited in 2026. In 2028, you would receive a compliance report to fill out, which is about 12 to 13 to 14 standards, just providing evidence for the kind of aspects of those. So it might be a review date of a policy or when the complaints report was last shared with the board or something like that. And then, so that's in between your reaccreditation, there's two compliance reports. And every other year, so if you got credited in 2026, then 2027 and 2029, we would do a compliance check, which doesn't require any action from the organization. It's just us, double checking some of the public facing pieces and then getting in touch if there's anything missing. So let's say that there's a policy that's supposed to be findable on the organizational website. Our staff will go and look for it, pretend they're just a person looking for that policy. Can they find it? And then if we can't find it, we get in touch and ask, is there a way to make this more clear? So usually that means we don't even get in touch with the organization because usually everything's fine. But yeah, that's how it works every other year. And then reaccreditation, it's hard to say exactly how reaccreditation will look 5+ years from now because we do refine our processes a lot. But you are starting from obviously the advantage of already having gone through it. So already, assuming you've been following the standards, that you should already be compliant with most of it. There are new standards introduced over time. We had 4 new standards come in a couple of years ago. So organizations reaccrediting had to sort of look at those and integrate those and discuss those. So that's my answer there.
Okay, we have a couple of questions asking who are our peer reviewers?
Yeah, our peer reviewers are amazing. They are a group of of representatives of the nonprofit sector with varying backgrounds and experiences. Leadership of organizations in the sector, CFO, accountants, lawyers. Folks that have a diversity of experience. And then when we put a panel together, we try to get a good representative sample of them, and then ideally those with some sort of expertise in the sector that they're focusing on. So, if there's a youth services organization, then we would try to find someone with a bit of experience in that to kind of help interpret things, to help provide context given the realities of that sector. All of our peer reviewers are listed on our website. Just by name, I believe at this time. We want to add bios soon, but we can provide a link to that. But if you go to imaginecanada.ca and then look for the standards, you'll be able to find a list of our peer reviewers there.
We have Jillian asking if somebody wants to apply for the Canada Capacity Building Program, can they join the standards community and start right away?
Yes, we definitely encourage that. If you're ready to get going, just be in touch with us to let us, and provide that context, and we'll get you set up there.
I actually have some questions about funders. I guess the idea is to ask who are, in general, do funders are they aware of the accreditation? Sometimes they can have their own assessment of certain aspects of what the accreditation, our accreditation also covers. Do we have any data whether the accreditation is desired by provincial, federal, city, municipal, family foundations, and other funders?
Yeah, and the Arts Council's question here too, I see around the funders for arts. Yeah, so we know of many funders that value this, and we have, of course, foundations, some major funders accredited ourselves, and who we're working with, in addition to Canada Life, to encourage accreditation in the networks, and they're providing support to those organizations and capacity building resources as they go through that process. In terms of specific funders, it's hard to name each one. We are as Imagine Canada as a whole is in a lot of dialogue with a lot of funders as part of our existing work. So definitely awareness is there. We have relationships with, for instance, the philanthropic foundations, kind of network organizations in Canada. So I think the fundamental part of this is that regardless of awareness of accreditation, we do like to emphasize the importance of kind of storytelling, of communicating what it means to your organization when you are undergoing these processes, because it's great to have a trust mark, and it's great to have to be in a list and to have those kind of the certificate and all these pieces. But on some level, at some point, there is like a communications question of like, how are you making the case for this in whatever way you're trying to promote this accreditation? If it's in a newsletter, if it's in a newspaper, if it's in a funding application, how do you tell the story? And we a big part of our job and Christina's job specifically is in kind of like helping organizations tell that story, given their kind of the stakeholders they're working with. But I think when you've been through the process, many organizations that go through the process are really proud of what they went through and how much they did and how much their organization changed and the commitments they made. And it's very powerful to hear that story. And so I think that story needs to be told, even if there's, let's say a perfect funder who's accredited and values accreditation and gets it. just saying that you're accredited won't do the same thing as explaining, expressing how it's changed your organization, and how that might give them reassurance or greater sense of faith that you'll be able to deliver on the mission, on the proposal.
Okay.
I see.
Um,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. We have one question about one of the activities that we are undergoing related to the grant writing standards. Can you expand on the role? On the goal of this initiative.
Yeah, this one is actually so it's grant making as opposed to writing. I may have said it in my English accent and it's been a little bit unclear, but this is because we have a fundraising section of the standards. There's always been this question of, well, what about funders? About giving. What's the best practice around giving? I mean, I imagine everyone in this meeting has very strong opinions about how they wish grant writing and proposals and reporting worked. And what are those best practices? What do funders think? What are the challenges they face? What do fundees think? And how would they change that process? What is the gold standard in terms of, transparency around the process, around who makes the decisions, around what the reporting requirements are or what they aren't? Um, yeah, there's it's sort of a big it's a big area of work that we're undertaking, and Canada Life is also supporting that work, which has been really great.
We have a question about the gap analysis tool, if it's available and where can we find it?
Yes, it is available, and I think if you go to the standards page, actually, I will try to get it for you right now, um, or maybe someone in the chat can, but yes, it's available. It's free. It used to be, you used to have to, go through like join the standards community. We ended up kind of opening it up a few years ago because uh, it's super valuable to have access to these standards and get a sense of where you're at. As a brief explanation, uh, we are working on this tool, but the best way to use it is to make a copy if you use Google Sheets or to download it. You can't edit it as view only, just so other people can get an unchanged copy of it. Thank you, Kat, for sharing that.
I think that's about it, what I see in the chat. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop them in.
Well, I see the AI summary from an AI bot there. I will just say that you don't need to obtain approval. And it's correct. I'm not I don't want to disagree with the AI bot. Or maybe that was a summary, yes. But you don't need board approval to submit your expression of interest for this. It's stage two, when we begin to actually ask more sort of deep questions, is when we recommend having board approval. So AI is right, but I just wanted to provide that little extra point there.
We have a question from Celeste asking if we have a brochure that we can share with webinar participants that outlines all the benefits of the program and other details.
Christina, you might know the
Actually,
answer.
I can answer that. We don't have a brochure at this point that is updated, but it's in the works. But Celeste, if you need help tailoring the message, we can provide other things than a brochure at this point. But a two-pager and a handbook is in the works. But I'd be happy to assist if we can in tailoring the message.
Yeah, we could also provide a slideshow, or if there's an interest in talking and having someone from Imagine Canada talk to your board, then we may be able to do that. So get in touch. And for sure, Jackie, we will, in addition to the recording, we'll send around a PDF of the slides as well. Perfect. Thank you, Celeste. Okay. We'll do a 11-second silence to make sure there are no more questions. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate you being here. Any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You can reach us at standards@imaginecanada.ca, and we will, or just respond to the email we're going to send out with the details of this. So thank you. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.